Okay, so in this one, we're going to kind of take that concept of chaining a couple of dominants together to create a chromatic sequential chain via consecutive dominants. And I'm actually just going to borrow one of the chains that's a personal one that I've actually used in any piece of music that's not finished. That's why I'm not going to play it. But and dedicated kind of like to this late Wagner kind of music. Anyway, that's besides the point. Again, if you don't know basic chromatic harmony in key, I have a course on this, and you really need to study that before you even bother with chromatic modulation. There's so many different things you can do, and like I said before, when you study someone like Wagner and like these highly chromatic composers, break it down into small chunk moves. Literally, just study one bar of something, learn one move at a time, and actually start to recognize that these little chunk moves reappear quite often in like the music of Wagner. So what's a chain sequence? As a review, and you probably should already know this, it's just repeating the same kind of pattern on different scale degrees. So and this would be an in-key chain sequence using this root movement. However, we also have out-of-key chain sequences, such as, let me just kind of... Chain sequences are really helpful in modulation, to make convincing modulation. So because it creates familiarity. And in this example, we're going to use a consecutive dominance. We already talked about dominant chains in previous episodes in this playlist, so if you haven't seen that, go back and watch those. I wrote out a sequence I used to create a consecutive chromatic chain sequence, and this is where knowing in-key secondary dominant functions, like the 5 of 4 in-key, because that's going to be our pivot point instead of staying in C minor. 2 consecutive dominants, the G7 and the C7, a little bit of a dominant chain, which will take us to F minor. We're going to create, I already created a sequential pattern here that actually you could keep repeating through the circle of fifths. And you could use the same exact move to escape F minor to B flat minor. Okay, so let me play through what I wrote out here. And you could hear the sequential pattern it repeats in F minor, exactly the same. And it creates this falling pattern, sequential pattern. And I could keep going around the circle of fifths, B flat minor, do the same thing. E flat minor. You will run out of room going downwards with this sequence, so just keep that in mind. So here's one of the most important aspects I consider about these things, the melodic motif. I did this first before I created the chain sequence, or before I wrote around the chain sequence. And this will be like the glue to the harmonic sequence, in which it is in my personal piece. And I wrote out just a segment of what I've done, and I'm not going to play it back, like I said, because it's not finished, and I don't like to play unfinished things, so I'm just going to play it on the keyboard. This particular harmonic chain sequence, because it doesn't continue with this forever. This is actually part of a build-up. So I know I do a lot of film score stuff, but truthfully, I like doing stuff like this so much more because it's so much more fun to me. I like the Wagner-esque kind of period music. So let me play through it first. So it starts with a really light texture and gradually gets thicker and thicker. So we have an implied C minor with a passing tone. D half diminished, augmented 6, French 6, 5 chord, the pass through the 7th, C7, our pivot point. Now this pattern just repeats in F minor. But as I said, the texture, as it becomes a crescendo, it becomes thicker and thicker. And we'll go ahead and stop there. So it's a highly chromatic chain sequence with consecutive dominants. Now I have another section where I do this, the augmented 6 chord, but I don't resolve the augmented 6 chord outward, but instead go to the 7th of the dominant. Same thing when I get an F. I'm not going to resolve that augmented 6 chord outward. It's still using the same harmonic sequence, okay? It's just a variation on it. And I'll just play through. So I'll go ahead and stop there. It creates highly chromatic, unresolved music. The point is that you don't have to resolve that augmented 6 note like that. You don't have to do that anymore. This is another trick that you could learn about chromaticism. You don't have to do that with that augmented 6. You could just take it down to the flat 7 of the 5 chord. And this is one of the tricks of that never-ending yearning kind of like Tristan style music, is just never giving the listener any sense of resolution. So there's suspensions, lack of resolutions, all that happening here. But what I really want to point out is that stuff like the augmented 6 chord, like the French 6, does not have to actually expand outwards, that augmented 6 interval. Doesn't have to do this. You can most certainly do this. Okay. To get to F minor. Chromatically like that. You don't have to expand outwards. Which will create a lot of tension and lack of resolution. So if I play a part of that sequence, it's the same harmonic sequence here, but I'm not resolving that French 6 anymore. And I'm not going to play through the whole sequence, but so lack of resolution, and I use this same exact sequence varied throughout my entire piece. I only have it sketched right now, the piece. But the point is that the less you give the listener in these highly chromatic things a chance to breathe, like complete and total resolution, the more you're going to have that yearning sound that never quite resolves, kind of like the late Wagner music. That's how you start producing that sound, is you actually never really resolve anything before it's going to a new tension. And so it's always constantly battling with tension, and in addition to chromatic passing tones and suspensions and all that. So you're getting closer and closer in this series to that kind of thing, but we have a lot more moves to cover. My suggestion first, though, is to learn how to create these chain sequences with also melodic motifs that are also chained. So that are also similar, but starting in the new key you're in. So you have both a harmonic sequence that's chained and then a melodic motif that's chained. So that's something different that we've done in the previous videos. And as I've said, concentrate on one move at a time. Just practice one move at a time. You could even rearrange this in a completely different way, the same exact sequence written up here, and create something different.